Good morning, everyone, and welcome to American Scousers Morning Coffee.
Morning
And do
tea.
we have the tea? And the tea right there with Mecca. Mecca, how are we doing this morning, man?
Very bleary-eyed. Very bleary-eyed. A lot of editing last night.
I had like a rough day yesterday, so it's good to be up and going this morning. So not as much news as what we've been used to all week. I think everybody's kind of gearing up for the start of the Premier League. There's a lot more general articles that I was seeing. So um one thing we did not talk about yesterday, so I kind of like wanted to touch up on that first, was Arteta playing You'll Never Walk Alone in practice. And I don't know if you saw the clip. Basically, this is like a clip leaked out of not leaked, I guess, is the poorest leak ever, probably more like released as a tease for the show they do for like Amazon. Did you see the clip, the full
I haven't
like
seen.
2 minutes?
I've seen the still photographs and I've seen the speakers they used. And like having been a former sound and music person, um, I don't know how they were trying to replicate "You'll Never Walk Alone" with two speakers of that size. They may as well have just pulled the local bin men into the training ground and have them just shout it at them.
It was weird because they have honestly more than the speakers and what they're trying to do. And Alan Walnut is with us. Good morning, Alan. Um, is him talking about his one of his experiences at Anfield, where middle of the game he just kind of pretty much like loses the plot. It sounds like for like an entire minute where he's not following the game, like his almost like overwhelms or over like with all the like the noise and everything happening, kind of like losing himself, everybody becoming a blur. That was more like a scary incident told than anything else, and I guess shows the impact the stadium has as you're playing in it, why there's a home field advantage. But it's very odd because I don't know. I can understand you saying, because he even says in the clip, I'm gonna try something new, like this is his like crazy professor idea kind of thing. And his assistant is like, "Oh, okay, yeah, like this is a great idea and stuff, just to make sure he makes it to the end of the month." And yeah, like you're saying, I don't know how that's helping because it's not like they're singing that all game. I know, like in the NFL, they'll pump to crowds because when they're playing in a dome or something like that, when it's going to be really loud, to be able to do the silent count for the snap and stuff like that. But like blasting "You'll Never Walk Alone" for like an hour, I don't know if they're gonna, if anything, people are gonna have flashbacks when the game starts. Mind you, it didn't work anyway. This was
It didn't work anyway.
before the game we beat 4-0. I mean, what part of that comes across the weirdest? But by the way, Daz is with us. He says he's ready, got me the cup of tea. Man, you and tea guys, like actually the funny thing is, as a Turkish person, you would think I'd be the tea guy too.
No,
Because I realize when I go home, which has been a long time, mind you, but how much tea is consumed on a daily basis is like a non-stop thing on the side. But I've been slightly Americanized, so at least in the morning now, it's
tuts
always
tuts.
coffee. I know, losing my culture. Go ahead. Go ahead. What were you thinking about the clip? I mean, actually, at least the whole concept.
It must be something with those pre-season documentary kind of things, because it just kind of reminds me of the Brendan Rodgers three envelopes, and I love Brendan Rodgers as a coach, but that kind of stuff, you're going to lose the players. You're going to get some player that was at that training session writing in their book a few years from now how embarrassing that was for them. Um, because it doesn't really, it's not, I mean, I've never coached or played in front of 50,000 people or 60,000 people or whatever. Like, I haven't even coached or played in front of 60 people. But even still, I've been a high skill coach and a good soccer skills, and the crowd of hundreds, if you can get them, could be quite loud. But it's still no substitute for like knowing what you're going to do on the field. So maybe not having that distraction of like the "You Never Walk Alone" banging on, for an hour, like, because we know it's sung at the start, it's sung at the end, and maybe sung sometime in the middle or sometime in 3/4 of the way through the game if things are going bad for us. But other than that, it's not like if they really wanted to do it correctly, they would have put all those great barbed songs that the Scousers come up with the humor in it that are really will turn your head. But it just seemed like the three envelopes thing. It's something that you read in a sports psychology textbook from 2002 or something, and then you go and do it, and it doesn't work because he looks stupid now, as far as I could see. He did that, and they lost heavily, and then you're walking in the dressing room, and you're looking at the manager, and you're going, "Well, that was a load of rubbish."
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many Arsenal. I mean, there might be like that Arsenal fan over there saying, "Like, see, this is what I like about Arteta. You know, he thinks outside the box or something like that." But then, once you know what happened afterwards, I guess that thrill is gone. You're like, "But that shit outside the box didn't work." Like I said, I can understand maybe it's eliminating the initial walking onto the fields, like nerves and stuff like that, but. I don't know. These are not guys like you're saying. This is not like a high school team. These guys have all played in front of like ridiculous stadiums, and some things they're ready for, and some things they're not. Um, Dad says I think Brandon put his own name in the envelope, which is probably possible. And I think that's what I found like the most odd. Like you kind of like you're saying, you kind of talk to these players afterwards and like the things they say. I remember like seeing an interview actually from like an ex-Galatasaray player and saying, like when they played at the Fenerbahce stadium, the ground would be shaking. Like they could almost feel the ground shake underneath them. And he was like, there's no getting ready for that. Like you have to experience it once or twice. And that's why it's important to have some experienced players, maybe to be able to more like communicate that and say, hey, man, this is what's going to go down. Be ready for it. You're never going to be totally ready for it. But at least when it happens, you're going to be like, oh, this is what he's talking about. And I think it's going to be less of a panic reaction than, I guess what happened to him and just got like totally overwhelmed.
I think it's interesting to say that, though, because also in the news for Arsenal is that Arteta has made Odegaard the captain this season. And he's like just like barely out of learning how to shave at this point. Well, he's like 23 or 24 or something like that, and hasn't really done anything in the game to warrant like captaincy. I mean, like we look at Henderson for us. Like he was just, even from the start of being at Liverpool, in the shadow of Gerrard, he was still trying to lead. And for in terms of comparisons of natural talent, he obviously didn't match up to Gerrard in terms of how to actually play soccer. But he was learning to be a leader then. Like the famous one I always love, I'll actually go back to watch it on YouTube sometimes just to G myself up a little bit, is when, what was his name? Diego Costa, the Chelsea forward, tried to square up to him in the game, and then Henderson wasn't having any of it. And that stood him in good stead. I can't even remember Odegaard starting last year. Like he wasn't like
it is an odd. I thought it was an odd choice. I mean, we don't know, I guess, what happens behind the scenes, but like
I think exactly what happens behind the scenes. Arteta has really weird ideas and then says, "Let's try this today."
I guess in this scenario, we know what happens behind the scenes. They're just listening to "You'll Never Walk Alone."
Okay, guys, I've got this great idea just to get us all faster. We're going to put icy hot in our underwear just before the game. Like it's. I think managers take risks when they do something like that. That's why I love Klopp. Klopp is very he's very forward thinking in terms of the sports science, but his approach to man management is really old school. It's literally we're going to run you into the ground so that when the game comes on, it's going to be easier. And then I'm going to treat you like grown-ups. Like I love what they do with the nutrition for the Liverpool players. It's not like Monday you're eating chicken and pasta, Tuesday you're eating pasta and chicken, Wednesday you're eating pasta with some chicken in salad. It's literally, as far as I read, they put like almost a buffet out, and the players can choose whatever they want to eat. And there'll be some unhealthy things as well for treats. I'm sure, like, instead of having French fries that are like deep fried in oil. They're probably air fried or something like that to get the healthy
Yeah,
alternative.
as healthy as unhealthy can be. Yeah.
But if you want that day, you can have it. They'll treat you like a grown up. These things that like Arteta would be doing, like a 24-year-old captain who's not really a big player yet, and then speakers at training, it's just it's gimmicky, and it strikes me as a manager or coach who's trying to be clever without actually doing the management part first.
And honestly, it almost made it look like it was a little made for TV, if you will, the
Could
whole
be, yeah, could
ordeal.
be.
And I know, like, Klopp has said that, they asked him if they, Liverpool would ever be involved in something like that. And to rephrase him, he pretty much said, as the cameras are coming in, he'd be going out the back door and he would just quit and would not be part of this ordeal. Because I think not only that, he's so big on the whole team concept. This kind of like takes away from that by having some people who are not on the team being part of the whole ordeal is probably, and it being a huge distraction on top of it probably is not a big thing for him. So speaking of teams, building teams and stuff like that, Chelsea has saved on their scouting department. They fired everybody. They're using those salaries to put together and going after people that other teams are interested in. It reminds me of my high school days where you kind of like come in the last minute and try to take a little bit out of everybody's essay to make your own. But hey, I made it. So will Chelsea make it with all these put together pieces that they're basically going after? I mean, like Cucurella, De Jong, and all these players that other teams were interested in for a long time and could not get across, and they're kind of like coming in. They were like, you know what? That's a good idea. Who are they going after? Yeah, you know what? Like, yeah, we should just go get him. And to be fair, they're kind of like going and doing the business and getting him.
I think that wasn't that Spurs policy a few years ago. Like whoever Liverpool were connected with, they would go for as well. I'm pretty sure that when Pochettino was there. But it seems to me like a very American thing to do, to come in and say, well, the way you've been doing it, even though we've zero experience in this league and I think in the sport as well, but we're going to do it this way. It's risky. I mean, like if I was a club owner and and a rival of Chelsea's and I saw that they were doing that, I'd start putting it about that I was going after the worst players that you could possibly think of and hope that they went and bought them.
You know who's a good idea. Yeah, just give him this paper. Like, tell him you stole our scouting report. Yeah, all the players they're adding are good players. And I think Sterling will do well over there, definitely. I don't think he will do as well as he did in City. I think sometimes you take these players out of a successful system and they were kind of like the result of the system. The system was, making the player better as opposed to necessarily the player making that system so much better. I think Sterling could be one of those examples, but it's still an upgrade for them, I think, over, like ZH or somebody like that. Koulibaly obviously is a solid one, but I don't know if they improved or kind of lost a little bit there by losing Rudiger, because I thought, he was one of the best center backs. So they lose him, they get Koulibaly, they get almost like a slightly older as well. Cucurella, I'm almost glad. I rather have him. There was constantly like conflicting reports. Brighton was saying nothing is agreed to, but it looks like it's almost done. Cucurella, to be fair, I rather have him go to Chelsea than City, because I'm really big on him and I didn't want him going to City. The De Jong thing makes sense because I know Barcelona wants a lot of Chelsea players. So Chelsea has that in hand, whereas United has been kind of going back and forth with nothing to offer. Whereas Barcelona need the money for one, but they can also use the players. So if they're getting, I don't know, like Alfonso or like Aspilicueta, somebody like that and some money, I think that's a good deal for them. So Chelsea looks to be in the driving seat on that one.
I think that I've read that they said Aspilicueta is not going for definite. So it seems to me that their policy seems to be just to acquire as many players as possible and then see what sticks. And then that's what their team's going to be like. I would, if they're buying all these players, I would want to know how much input Tuchel actually has into it. Whether it's because it's a different policy than what he's had the year before and the year before, like last season, the season before. So I wonder if it's a case of like they've just come in and said, we're going to buy lots of players and then you're going to have to sort them out. Or he said, finally, I've got owners who will buy me what I want, and here's my Christmas list, and I want everything on it, please, thanks. I don't know. It's like a higher level problem that Leicester has of like a massive squad. You can't play everybody, and they're not all the same level. So I think I think we said it the other day. It's an owner coming in trying to get the supporters on side, especially given that the previous owner, for whatever ideological faults he might have had, and financial faults, so to speak. I think he at least put everything into Chelsea and made Chelsea from a mid-table, almost kind of glamour club to one of the best clubs in Europe. So you kind of have to come in if you're the new owner and say, right, well, I'm going to keep that going at least, and then I'm going to make it better. And the best way to do that is to start buying players. It's the Mike Ashley thing. When Mike Ashley went to Newcastle, to just start hoovering up players left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
Not particularly good ones, but the supporters don't. It's like professional wrestling. The supporters like that pop, like that feeling of, okay, we've signed a player, and then no thought to how it's going to actually work out.
And more importantly, I think players they've heard of. Not like this, they're not going and getting this, like he plays in the France U21 team or something like that, because I don't think that would have the impact they want with those signings. So they're getting all these guys that I'm sure you guys heard of him, Koulibaly, I'm sure you guys have heard of him. So I think that's kind of like, I agree with that. And I know like Tuchel is like a weird case too, because, he was bitching about, the quality of the squad after losing a season, like a preseason game, like a friendly.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're like, well, who do you want? Well, these guys are getting these guys. Do you want these guys here? Like, take this. We just bought this guy and stuff like that. But I think we're gonna see if Tuchel is good at. Pep gets a lot of crap for, inheriting teams that are pretty much deep, and then spending another bazillion dollars and adding on them. But you got to give him credit for being able to manage those squads and keep people who are, stars in their national team. I know we say, but they're getting a lot of money, but still these guys all want to play. They're all competitors. They didn't get to this level by just taking the paycheck and sitting on the side. They're competitive. They want to be out there. He's done a good job at City. And I think Klopp in the recent years, obviously, as we improve more on depth, in terms of keeping everybody happy and focused on the goal. Obviously, it's easier when you're winning to keep people happy and, follow in the direction you're going. But I don't know. We're going to find out this season if Tuchel can do that, because I don't know if, Sterling is going there to start. So if he's on the bench, I don't know if he's going to like it as much as, he didn't like it in City either, but he had to almost sit down and take it because the results are there. I think the results kind of dictate and get behind Pep or Klopp when they do those moves. I don't know if he's going to necessarily get that in Chelsea, and he is known for imploding. So I know, when we did the Premier League show and do this preseason previews, I know especially Gally was kind of like, kept saying Tuchel will be out in no time. He would implode. Do you see that happen? Do you see Tuchel there at the end of the season? Let's go that way.
I have a suspicion he'd be gone. Simply because I think you're right in terms of the man management aspect of managing a large squad of talented players. And Tuchel has a reputation of being quite weird, for want of a better phrase. Like he everything I've read about him says he's not a good people person. He doesn't manage, almost like Brendan Rodgers. He doesn't manage upwards well. He doesn't manage laterally well. He just focuses on the coaching part and almost kind of like a savant. That's just like, put him on the coaching field, he's brilliant. Take him off the coaching field, no clue how to operate in the world. Benitez is like that as well. Like, you just put him on the training field, he's great. Off the training field, a strange fish. That's kind of like the impression you get from people that have played for him. So I could see that. I think for Sterling, now that's not going to be handed to him on a plate. He's actually going to have to learn how to shoot properly. That will put some power on it.
That could take a while, yeah.
That could take, yeah. If Tuchel can manage to get Sterling to be able to shoot with power, he'll probably be the best coach in the league. But yeah, no, I could see a situation where he leaves and then maybe Pochettino comes in or something like that. I have this feeling all the time that Brendan Rodgers is going to end up at Chelsea at some point because he was there before, and he always comes out of things with a decent reputation.
He might be available by then as well, like we were talking yesterday.
Yeah.
So yeah. That's very possible. Last thing I want to get to today is this. I don't know why I know they've been the most vocal about it, and perhaps they have the deeper squads, but Klopp and Guardiola get their way. The 5-sub ordeal, I'm pretty big on it because I feel like it will give players like Elliott and Carvalho like more opportunities to get out there, Nunez to be able to be eased into it. What do you make of this? I mean, it goes back to what you were saying a bit earlier when we were talking about Arteta. I know some managers are almost going to overthink things and make some substitutions that throw away the game. But is it an advantage for the big boys, or is it an advantage, or is it pretty much even across the board?
No, I think it's an advantage for the big boys. I mean, like if you compare, just because we were talking about, if you compare Liverpool, our squad, with Leicester's squad drops off fiercely in quality after the 12th player, almost. Now that Schmeichel is gone. So like, because I'm not convinced that Danny Ward is a decent number one. I thought he was always a great backup keeper. And those clubs and below are going to struggle to use their 5 substitutes for anything other than fitness and freshness at the end. But if you're City, Liverpool, Chelsea now, probably United to an extent, maybe Arsenal, possibly, and probably Newcastle in terms of fighting for those European places at least. You're going to take your 5 players off, and you're going to put 5 players of really good quality on against Forest, against Wolves, against Southampton, and they're not going to be able to cope. So I think in that sense, it just because we talked about, it's exactly like high skill. If you're a good big high skill coach in a soccer team, and you have a 20-player roster of all premier players as they say over here, and you're playing the small local parochial school that has like 11 players total in their entire program, you can just roll on and roll subs off all game and just run them into the ground. I'm not a huge fan of the 5 subs thing. I would prefer to see it more for cup games in extra time. I'm okay with the idea of maybe 5. So I think it's 5 subs in 3
instances, like 3 stops, if you want to say.
Because that at least means that there has to be some strategy to it. It can't be just like roll on, roll off. But I'm old school. Like if we could still play with the leather footballs with the laces in them, I'd probably go for that as well. But but I think it does advantage the clubs, but it only advantages them in the 80-90% of the games they're playing against the fodder, so to speak. It's not going to be an advantage when City play Liverpool, or City play United, or Liverpool play United, or City play Chelsea, etc., or in the Champions League, because you're coming up against similar squads of quality, and that's when you're going to see who can make the substitutions and who can't.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea, and we talked about this on the Monday podcast with the boys a couple of weeks ago, I think, and a couple of things can come out of it. I know sometimes, when a team comes in, let's say like Southampton or somebody who's trying to kind of like, come to Anfield, kind of like try to hang on for a tie. Sometimes when you have those games where you have a lot of possession, you can kind of say, hey, eventually, if you've ever played against a team where they keep possession and you play defense, sadly, I've been in those situations. It's freaking exhausting. Mentally, especially, it's exhausting. Mm-hmm. So, you feel like, the goal is coming as a Liverpool fan, and you can kind of see the other team starting to wear down as the game goes. It's almost, if you're like an American football fan, it's almost a team that can run the ball. In the beginning, it doesn't look all that, but, if they have they keep the ball and they keep the other team on the field, third quarter, fourth quarter, people start to wear down. And the attacking player always is an advantage because they know where they're going. As a defensive player, you have to freaking react and chase people around. So being able to sub for a team like Southampton in that scenario, getting some fresh legs out there is, I think, important. It will help them. The key is, it kind of goes back to what you're saying. I think not only quality, I think it's going to show how much those players, we always talk about, like, he was always prepared, ready to start, even when he wasn't starting, blah, blah. Like, how much do these guys understand the gameplay, and like the game plan, I should say, and the shape and stuff like that. For, I think, bigger teams, it's, to me, it's going to show a bit more about how coaches can make changes,
Yeah.
especially like a guy like Klopp. I mean, if something happens in the first half, you make it change because of an injury, and now you want to keep one in your pocket, so you can't really use that one to like the 80th when we will roll out Divock out there. But it only gives you one player to make a substitution, and you can't do a major tactical change with only one guy usually. I know that's one of the reasons why Klopp likes these guys that can play multiple positions.
Yeah.
But it's still tricky. I think, doing this enables people to be able to say, okay, throwing three guys out there, we're changing formation, we're going to 4-2-3-1 or whatever it might be. But at the same time, I can see some managers, and especially a guy like Pep, maybe this is why I like this more than I should. I can see a guy like Pep always overthinking it and doing something that actually hurts them.
Oh yeah, no, and he's done that before, even just with the three subs. He especially against when he was there in the league, like Roy Hodgson or Sean Dyche or whoever who do play that low block kind of style. He panicked a lot, and he would not just think about trying to win the game that was on. He'd try and think about winning the game that they had after that game, like the following Wednesday or whatever. And you could see the wheels turning in his head. But what I don't like about it in general as a concept is it stops it being a player's game and starts to edge it toward far more towards being a coach's game, which I don't like, because that's the American way. The American sports are coaches' sports. Like everything is dictated by the coach. On maybe hockey isn't, but in football, coach dictates the plays, apart from the audibles or whatnot. In basketball, I always for the few basketball games I've seen, watching the coach doing the finger signals and stuff like that, and calling the play. Like I coached against a nice bloke, but for an under 10 girls game, an American coach who was shouting out things like blue 42, cherry 7, cherry 7. He had all these codes for how 10-year-old girls should be playing soccer, which from a European point of view, I probably could have got red carded for laughing so loudly. But I think the part of the charm and global appeal of soccer is that it is a player's game. You don't need a coach. I always felt the coaches in the old school who had the idea that their players should solve the problems out on the field, and their job is to give them the tools to do that. I thought they were like Paisley. I think Souness always says Paisley was like that. He never gave you the solution. He always said, well, go sort it out. You're a professional player. What do you think you need to do? So that's my kind of old school fogey kind of reasoning against
it. Actually, that is a good point. I think, especially like, I've done like youth soccer here, and yeah, I think that's because when the coach is doing all that stuff, and I think a lot of fans are like this in football kind of too. We like coaches who live the game, like, who's running up and down the sideline, going nuts, yelling and screaming and stuff like that. So I think I noticed that a lot over here in youth soccer, where, certain coaches, do all that crazy stuff because, to the other sideline where the parents are watching, who don't know the game very well, that's like, oh, see, he's like teaching him stuff. Is he teaching him soccer though? He's teaching him stuff.
Yeah.
But is he teaching him soccer? So the coach who's quiet, who kind of like just watches the game, and maybe at halftime or when the player comes off, talks to them quietly and says, tries to show them things to see on the field, see what was happening there and stuff on a one-on-one level, looks like you're just too laid back, you're not doing anything. So, and then you can kind of like see, especially like, you do those like youth things where you play the same team twice, and then you can kind of see one team got a lot better overall. They just play better soccer.
Yeah.
If you know soccer, you kind of see that. But and then the other team is just doing the same thing again. He's just calling the same stupid plays, but nobody has really improved much.
Yeah.
Everybody's just doing like a set play kind of thing. So that is a good point. It's going to be interesting. I do like it overall, especially for a team like us. I just hope we go back and forth on Monday. I have a lot more faith in Klopp than Bickler and Galley does in terms of being able to use these subs and get some rest, because we saw the boys getting more and more tired as the season went on when you play that many games. So I'm hoping it helps that.
I think for Klopp though, like he's going to use the subs for fresh legs. I love the guy to bits, but I've never seen in the 7 years that he's been at Liverpool, I've never seen him as a coach who makes tactical changes that change the game in the way that, say, Benitez would or Mourinho would. He's not really. You don't see a wild change from the 4-3-3 to like a 2-3-5 or something like that to try and get a goal. Outside of everybody's just pouring forward against a bunker team. So I think for Klopp, when he uses the subs, it'll be probably because he spotted maybe a weak defender in the opposition and he wants to run at that defender more. So you take maybe Salah off and maybe Diaz is on the bench and or Elliott, and you throw them on to just get the fresh legs on that player. I'm open-minded about it. I don't like the concept of it in general, as long as it doesn't go towards like the slippery slope argument of it. Eventually will be roll in, roll out subs, like and re-entry and all that, which would be horrible for professional soccer. But we'll see how it goes. It'd be an interesting experiment at the very least.
Well, the party starts tomorrow, so tomorrow morning I'm sure we'll kind of like touch up on that. If you have not done your freaking fantasy lineups, this is how this game works. It will lock up tomorrow once that game kicks in, so don't wait for freaking Saturday thinking you can just kick back Friday night and set it up. Well, Maka, thanks, and thanks to all those who are listening. Don't forget to check up and follow up on the news on the website. That's where we kind of like follow and keep up on the headlines there, and we'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.